My initial exposure to adoption was I spent 3 weeks in Africa and I worked in an orphanage in Mozambique. But then I kind of forgot about it until our first date. I was taking her back home and dropping her off at her parents, and as I walked her to the door, she said, "I just want you to know I plan on adopting all of my children." And initially I was just like, okay, and I kind of put it on the back burner until after we were married and the idea of kids came up. We were praying through, should we, have our own to start, or should we pursue adoption? And our heart was pursue adoption at the beginning.
At that time, our adoption agency said, why don't you think about South Korea? They're moving quickly right now. It's your first adoption. We prayed about it, and God just kept bringing people in our life that were adopted from South Korea. And so one girl who had been adopted from South Korea came to me and she said, if you want to do this, she's like, here's $2,000 to get started. And that was exactly what we needed.
One of the biggest hurdles for people considering adoption, especially international, is the cost. We could probably write a book about all the awesome stories. I think when you step out and obey, God, He meets you.
I'm always amazed at what God's done. Our little Tyson came home at 9 months old, and he came off the plane and they put this little baby in my arms, and we just instantly loved this little guy.
So in 2010, we started the process of our second son, Pax. And I would say of our 3 boys, this was the most emotionally and spiritually draining, in terms of, it was about a 3.5-year process.
We started coming to Mosaic, and I remember Brooke and Renaud were going through their adoption process at that time, and I was just like, we have to come to this church. They understand. Looking around and seeing all these families who were either in the process or had adopted, I was just like, this is home. We were in the process of Pax, and it was definitely time of just waiting and trusting the Lord and kind of holding our hands open, not knowing, whether we would have him or not. So months and months would pass, and it came about that they're like, you're gonna have to go to Korea, you're gonna have to go to court and make a case, and then you'll have to come back and wait for them to call you. And I said, well, why don't we just live in Korea, stay there, and work in the orphanage, and that way we don't have to leave. So they're like, okay, that's possible, but it's going to cost you guys because you're going to have to, have a place there, and you're going to have to live there. But we did it, and the only possible way that we could do that was through Love Made Visible in this church.
Are going to be able to get Paxton, so yeah, we're super excited.
Thank you guys. You guys have all been a part of this. We got through, all the hoops and hurdles, so we were just waiting for the call to say, hey, you can come. Finally, the day came when we hear screaming and we see Rachel jumping up and down. And I go, Tyson, I bet we got the call. And sure enough, she's like, we got the call. We get to go. But she's like, they want us to buy our tickets, and book our reservations and hotel in the next 3 days. So after kind of the joy settled, we realized, we had spent every penny paying for the process, but now we had to get to Korea and pay to be there. So again, we were like, what do we do? And I was like, well, I'll just call Renaud and see if he has any ideas. So I call Renaud and share the story, and I'm like, Renaud, I need to buy 3 airfare tickets round trip to Korea so we can go pick up this child. And he's like, well, Love Made Visible, we're gonna help you out. So why don't you just go ahead, buy the tickets, and we'll figure out the details of it later.
I just remember Andy saying, we'll pay you back, we'll do anything, if you guys help us, we'll make a way. And I just remember Renaud being like, you don't have to, you don't have to pay us back. But I've never experienced that kind of generosity. I don't know, it makes me cry every time. The fact that this church gave us this gift, I don't know if we ever would have finished.
And so that just kind of was like, I think reflects the heart of this church. It's just like, we're gonna do whatever it takes to rescue as many children we can and just bring redemption to their life.
We finally brought Pax home. I couldn't wait to bring him here. I couldn't wait to bring him to Mosaic. When we walked in the door, I just remember carrying him and I saw Renault. I said, Renault, I want you to meet Pax. And so, you know, he was doing the whole thing. And then Renault looked at me and he said, well, when are we gonna do this again? And in my mind, I'm thinking, we're done. We can never do this again because it was so hard and it cost so much and so many people gave, like this will never happen again. And I just looked at him and I said, I don't know if we can. And he said, you can't, but we can. He's like, as a church, we can. And I just remember having to walk away because I had so many emotions, like thinking, who says that? Who does that, you know? And I had hope because I was like, we can have more kids, like we can do this.
So about, I don't even know if it was a full year later, we got a phone call from our adoption agency, and typically you pursue them and say, I'm interested, but they were calling us. She sends me a text of a picture of this little boy who happened to be our son Bear now, and she said, hey, there's this little boy, they want us to adopt him, what do you think? And I'm like, just tell him yes. And she's like, good, because I already did. So, as always happens, this one actually went along pretty quick, again, until we hit one of those points again where it's like, you're nearing the end and you're gonna need X amount of dollars funding. And she goes, well, why don't you ask Felix if we can apply for another grant and I'm like, I'm not calling Felix again. I'm not double dipping on him. And so I sent him a quick email and I was like, hey Felix, we need like another $7,000. I'm not sure if Love Made Visible would consider giving us a portion of that or direct me elsewhere. And I think within a couple days he called me or emailed me and said, hey, we're going to actually give you the entire $7,000. You don't have to match it. We have enough funding right now in the budget for that. And so Love Made Visible covered that amount. And so once again, Mosaic, you know, they don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk of what they say. We're going to meet Baby Bear for the first time.
So yeah, we brought Bear home and been wild ever since. He lives up to his name.
Say, we're one of those stories that whether you gave $5 or $10 or $1,000, like we have children in our home and running through the halls of this church because you gave. And so no amount of giving is too small. Many times the only thing we had was $35 to fill out an application, and once we said yes, like God responded to our obedience, and you know, our 3 boys total was over $135,000, and we never took out a loan, we never went into credit card debt because of it. Like God would just meet us at each stage along the way. You have a heart for adoption and you think, I could never afford it. You know, the Bible says in James, you know, true religion is to care for orphans. And I think when we obey God and obey His word, whether we have $1 to obey Him or $50,000 to obey Him, that He'll meet the difference. And this church will also step in, I believe, to whatever capacity it's able to help make those dreams and those passions come true. So sometimes we're waiting on God, but I think sometimes God's waiting on our obedience, and then He releases what we need when He sees that we step out in faith and trust Him.
Yeah.
Yeah.